Most enterprises don't have an AI problem, they have an information problem. Today we explore how strong, governed information turns AI into experiments, from experiments into business outcomes, and how AI agents can become part of the workforce. Joining me today is Shannon Bell, Executive Vice President, Chief Digital Officer, and Chief Information Officer at OpenText. Shannon oversees all IT and digital systems, data platforms, networks and communications, commercial and corporate cloud operations, and security and compliance. With over 25 years of leading transformations across Canada, the US, and Europe at companies like Rogers Communications, Amdocs Bridgewater Systems, NewStep Networks, Metasolv Software, Axiom Systems, and Newbridge Networks, quite the list, she brings a wealth of experience in integrations, product innovation, and digital strategy. Shannon holds an MBA from the University of Surrey and is passionate about data-driven innovation and driving business growth at OpenText. Shannon, welcome. Delighted to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And for braving the weather in this cold Toronto day. Shannon, I'd love to start by looking at leadership and the role of leadership. You've led transformation at some of Canada's largest technology organizations. Which experience would you say most shaped your particular approach, your point of view, to leading digital innovation today and to scaling it?
I think, over the years, if I look at the opportunities I had to lead technology transformation, it was really a series of evolutions in technology and opportunities that kind of drove my passion for transformation. And so, I think back to the early days when, in networks, we were just being introduced to IP technology. And, that was really one of my first opportunities. I had the opportunity to deploy IP VPNs, which were being deployed for the first time in Europe. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what I learned through that process when I was doing hands-on deployment was, technology is not something that is so challenging you can't solve problems with it. And so I kind of looked at that deployment, which seemed at the time very groundbreaking, new technology, a little scary and daunting, and realized at the end of the day, it's just technology. We're going to solve a business problem. We're going to stay focused, and we're going to make sure that we can address and deliver the outcomes. And it kind of ingrained in me this notion that no problem is not solvable.
Yeah.
And that technology is an enabler for change. And so over the years, as technology evolved, whether it was going from waterfall projects to agile, whether it was the start of digital when we were doing self-service,
Yes.
Digital, banking, digital enablement for customers, mobile apps, all of these technology transformations over the years just really ingrained in me this view that, new technology is not something to be scared of. So be curious, learn the technology, but learn how you can use it to drive outcomes. And it really taught me that the projects that fail are where you're trying to use technology for technology's sake. Mm-hmm. And if you're really focused on what business problem you're solving and how technology does it, those are the keys to the best transformations. So I had amazing opportunities to deliver transformations at telcos that were delivering new capabilities to customers for consumer and enterprise. And that kind of built that passion that these are solvable problems. We can make a real impact. And that led me to my current role where I'm driving transformation every day.
Right. So I'm taking away from there a little bit of an aspect, or at least an attitude of keep calm and carry on. Stay focused on your business. Stay focused on fundamentals. Don't get yourself technology focused necessarily, but apply creative thinking there. How can I change the business using the technology rather than doing a pure play on the tech itself?
For sure. And stay curious about learning new technology. Don't define yourself by the technology. At one point in my career, I was pretty firmly a network expert.
Yes.
I thought everything there was to know about telecom networks. And I almost passed the opportunity to move myself into the software stack by being so focused on what I knew and not the opportunity to learn.
The stretch and the opportunity.
And I'm really thankful I got pushed into that area because I learned something very quickly in software. Everything is solvable in software. It's much more forgiving than networks are. But also it just gave me a completely different perspective on the value that you can deliver to the customer at the end of the day. And so I think staying curious, staying open to learning helps drive the introduction of new technology.
And ultimately evolve the business, I think.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm curious what principles beyond that have stayed with you in many in the various diverse situations you faced. I think you've been in acquisitions, product and market changes, and large-scale integration programs. Are there any axioms that you find yourself applying when you're looking holistically at what we need to do in the company, even if we just step away from technology for a second?
I think simplicity wins the day. And I think that, there's a tendency to overcomplicate. And sometimes people overcomplicate because of lack of knowledge or because of too much knowledge. But I think that, having that business lens and being able to translate technology to business and simplify has been what has helped me throughout my career constantly. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, you build relationships and you're communicating with stakeholders. And the relationships are really built on being able to communicate at a level that both sides understand. And in
Right.
technology, sometimes we get into the acronyms and we get really excited about the power of the technology, but we lose our stakeholders. And so being able to relate on on terms that make sense, being able to simplify the technology to what it can and can't do or how you want to use it, and even simplify business problems.
Yes.
And I find that especially now in the era of AI, where everyone wants to use AI to solve the most complicated problems, but actually the right strategy is to start with the simple problems. And sometimes it seems so easy and so fundamental and so basic, but that's where you start to build the foundation and get the biggest wins. And so for me in my career, it's always been about simplifying, being able to take it to that level of tech that you need to be able to do to be credible in your role, but then to be able to bring it back to the most simplest representation of it for the broader business.
So simplicity is elegant, and simplicity you can rally around, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes me think of my own discipline of governance, which is often a word salad or an acronym salad that loses people, right? And if you can't focus on the whys and the wherefores and what we're really solving for, then you're working uphill effectively.
Absolutely.
Let's go a little bit from the business management perspective to the technology powering so many transformations today and that you're driving out at OpenText, agentic AI, namely. You've spoken about a blended workforce of human talent and AI agents. Help us understand a little bit about what that workforce looks like in practice and how your fellow executives should think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think agentic AI brings a great opportunity, but it doesn't happen without having the right foundations in place. And so it would be easy to say the power of agents and can do this and that and displace these roles. But without a foundation of good business processes and solid information management, you're never going to achieve outcomes with agentic AI. So assuming that foundation's in place,
Yes.
Then tackling agentic AI, for us, it was a go slow to go fast journey. And I think of, that often when I'm explaining to people why they can't run 1,000,000 miles an hour, even though the technology is capable of doing it. And I think about it in the context of, if you apply AI to a not a well understood business process, you're going to get a not great outcome. And so for us, it was really about looking at all the business processes across the organization and which ones lend themselves to agentic AI, and where do you start? And so, many organizations start with what we would, call the low-hanging fruit. What are those areas where? And so for us, that was our IT help desk. It's an area we know really well. We have good, well-documented business processes. It sits in our domain, so we are the business and the tech team delivering it, so it makes it a little easier. But for us, it actually started with making sure that we had the right systems and tools in place to manage our business processes. Step one, no AI. And that in and of itself delivered a major benefit to the organization. We actually were able to reduce about 30% of the requests coming into our L1 help desk. And we could have declared that a success and stopped, but we knew that there was more value to come from layering on AI. And so taking that in a phased approach and coming then in the second phase with AI meant that we could be very targeted and focused on what are the agents doing, why, how are we using them, and how do they fit into those end-to-end business processes? And one of the challenges that we grappled with in the early stages was trying to make the agents too complex. Again, back to that simplicity, you think about complex tasks or roles and you think an agent can do this, and absolutely it can. But with the more complex roles, you end up with all kinds of corner cases and
edge cases and so on.
Edge cases, major opportunities for fallout. And then the performance suffers, you don't achieve the results. And so we very early took a very focused effort to make very discrete agents. Task-based, simple things.
Chunking it out a lot.
Absolutely. And then you can orchestrate those into beautiful flows. But, having a philosophy of very simple agents, some might say too simple, but that allows us to then reuse those in different scenarios and manage them effectively and keep the human in the loop. And so for us, what that translated into was, kind of side-by-side role descriptions of what is the agentic capability doing and what is the human in the role capability doing. And as we progressed from L1 roles into more sophisticated roles, we saw a lot of value in looking at that. And I'll give you an example of our most complicated role to hire for today. Yeah. It's called a site reliability engineer. And if you know that role, you know that these individuals are gold to the organization. They understand the intricacies of cloud operations at a level that is so impactful to your operations, but they're very hard to find. And so we were constantly recruiting and not finding the right talent for this role. And the leader in that organization said, I need to take my SREs, which are an amazing talent pool, and deploy them on the most high value tasks in the role. And there's some stuff that they're doing that I can use agentic AI for. So built a very focused description of what agentic AI could help with and what we needed our SREs to do. And guess what? We need our SREs to be making decisions, to ultimately be making the changes in the cloud configurations and driving the architecture, the sizing, the scaling, things that we don't trust AI to do. But there were a lot of things that they could use AI as their assistant to do, to give them more time and capacity to work on these other tasks. It also helped us in an area where we couldn't find talent in the market. And so it's been an amazing synergy of human and agentic workforce and really driving even more value out of this role than what we were seeing previously.
There's a whole lot to unpack there, but just starting at the beginning, I think we're back to simplicity. Simplicity is also clarity about your business architecture, right? Those business processes. If you can't articulate what's being done clearly and simply, well, maybe you don't understand it well enough to automate it. I think it's also very interesting that you've introduced the notion of, as you're dealing with the SREs, with this very hard to find role, almost sort of twinning a little bit, right? The assistant concept. And that sort of tees me up for the people dimension kind of thing, which was my next question. I'm curious how the SREs, for example, or other help desk people, etc., how they felt during this process. In your experience, how does the deployment of the agentic workforce affect employee experience? And how do you drive that culture change and, I suppose, nurture employee motivations in the new agentic world? I think that the SREs probably saw the benefit for themselves really directly because they can put to the side some of those repetitive tasks, those lower value tasks. Has that been generalized, or how do people react to this, Shannon?
It's a human element, so there's not one general reaction. I think that would be the first thing I would say. But I think that those that are more experienced and knowledgeable about the technology are less fearful of the technology and are more embracing it. So the SREs who work with technology every single day are embracing it because they see the value and the benefit to their day-to-day role. There's still fear across the organization that has to be dealt with because there's been so much hype in the industry on AI and what it can and cannot do and what roles it's going to displace and it's not. And so we try and frame our adoption of AI around this is an assistant for how you're going to do, and it's going to take some of these tasks, but there's still definitely fear. One of the things we did this year was we gave every single employee across the organization an AI development goal. And so that 22,000 employees, doesn't matter what role, I have one myself, and everyone has an AI development goal as part of their career planning and their development planning. And that was to try and raise the level of education around AI across the organization and start to dispel some of the myths and fears around it. And I think it's been helpful in terms of opening people's eyes to the potential of AI. It's also been a learning experience for all of us because it's been very important to make sure that we have the availability of learning and training sessions, of tools for employees, of how we're tailoring and packaging the rollout and change management associated with the tools. And so I think it's a learning curve for organizations as you're starting to roll out the technology to understand the human element and the change management piece of the puzzle, which I would have told you probably 2 years ago that our biggest hurdle was going to be the technology rollout. Now I'll tell you that's actually not it. The technology is enough or good enough as it is for initial rollouts. The actual hurdle is the people in change management and how you focus the rollout to those organizations.
Is AI different from other technologies you've worked with this way in terms of how people react to it?
That's a great question. I think that it is a little different, but not a lot different. We've been through so many waves of technology. Think about when we got email, the internet, mobile devices, think through all these different waves of new technology. And there's always been some hesitation.
Right.
There's always been the promise. I came from telecommunications, and I remember years ago the promise of 5G and what was going to be the killer app. And, those were conversations that were pervasive, much like AI today. I think the unknown for people and the challenge in the AI world is, what is it going to displace and how quickly is it going to displace certain roles? And what does that mean for things like our education system? How we're training students? What are those future roles? And
the skills that they need to bring to bear.
Absolutely. And how are we tailoring our curriculum in public school, in elementary, in high school, in universities to actually address the future needs of the workforce? So are we really understanding that? And I think that is where there's probably more reservation. Apprehension is probably a better word. Yeah, absolutely. Around what it means. And I think that, we don't even know across the board the full potential of this technology. But, we didn't know it back then either for many of the new technologies.
Sure. It's interesting because there's a bit of a paradox, I think, from the leadership and executive perspective on is this truly a technology-driven way of revisiting the business or not? One thing, I'd like to take you back to one thing that you said early on that just stayed in my mind about go slow to go fast. Would you say that OpenText, or would you consider yourselves early adopters of agentic AI? Was it very experimental for you, or was it? I wonder what was underneath go slow to go fast, or behind it rather. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's. It's a couple of things that, were kind of very present in our thinking. So number one, if you think of OpenText, we are a technology company delivering technology products to our customers. And so one side of it was our technology strategy around bringing AI to our products for our customers. And the other piece of it was our internal adoption of AI as an enabler for our business users. Okay. And so there was kind of two sides to the puzzle. And, we probably prioritized more the AI enablement of our products for our customers, knowing we had to meet a market demand, than our internal adoption.
I see.
I think that was one piece where we went slower on the internal adoption side. The other piece was, as you grow an organization, and OpenText grew through many, many M&As, harmonizing your business processes, your systems, your tools, and so on is a difficult task.
Yes.
And it's a never-ending task as well.
Yes.
And so for us, it was looking at, do we have the right foundation to build on? And are there things that we want to do before we start trying to layer AI? Because, AI on bad data and poor business processes means bad outcomes, right? And so I constantly was replaying, do we have the right foundations? Are these the foundations we want to build on? And how do we make sure that we have a clean system architecture and landscape that lends itself to AI? And so it was a balancing act of the demand of employees to use AI, making sure that we had the right tools and governance and processes in place to enable it, and then also tailoring the rollout cohort by cohort, because some of our early experimentation was if you just release tools to all of your employees without proper change management, the adoption is going to be low. They're going to get mixed results and they're going to get frustrated. And so we learned very quickly that we needed very tailored rollout across teams.
I see.
That also gave them examples of how to use it because it was a learning curve that they too were on. And so it became this phased rollout, looking at different opportunities across organizations, where it would have the most impact, where we wanted to invest. We took a very business case-driven approach to looking at the outcome we expected, the business drivers for it, to make sure that we were prioritizing things that were going to enable the teams to drive innovation and revenue growth, as opposed to just cost cutting. And so it was kind of this constant balancing act to get it right in terms of what the priorities were, to make sure those organizations were ready.
Yes.
One of our earliest partners in deploying AI was HR. And many people ask me, why HR? And I said, well, we were lucky. We had a technology-savvy HR team, but we also knew that HR was going to be instrumental in driving change management across the organization. And so if we could work with HR and they could see the impact.
You're building champions.
You are. And they are going to help across all the other organizations. And so some of it was balancing the readiness of the organizations as well. And definitely, I got a lot of complaints. Everyone wants their favorite AI tool. Why do we need a software review board? Why do we need governance? Why can't we have all these things? But I think that, we would have had a lot more failures had we rushed. And, we still had failures. Mm-hmm. And, every organization that's driving innovation should have failures.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're not doing enough. But we had a manageable level of failures, and we had enough successes to drive adoption.
Thank you for unpacking that. Go slow to go fast. I'm curious. We tend to, when we think of use cases, right? We'll think of the two generic buckets that you brought up, right? Operational efficiencies on one side and driving innovation and growth on the other hand. But I think you probably came up with some surprises in there. Again, like the SREs, removing a bottleneck from resourcing. Okay, of course. It does fit one of those two buckets ultimately, but I'm curious where you've ended up after a few years of doing this. Where do you think agentic AI will drive measurable value for large enterprises over the midterm horizon over the next 12, 24 months as they start along their own journeys?
I think there's a few key use cases where agentic AI is really good.
Okay.
Search and summarize, easy. Data analysis,
no-brainer
easy.
Almost.
No-brainer.
Yeah.
Use it. It's a great tool. And it will provide you with a level of data which you still need humans to challenge and validate and put into the context of your business. But that heavy lift of data analysis is pretty seamless, and the technology is really quite good at it.
Right.
So one use case where very obvious the returns. From an operations perspective, it's excellent at driving root cause analysis, and being able to find the needle in the haystack, so to speak, in terms of trends, what you're seeing in operations, and being able to find where the issue lies. And so being able to leverage AI, we use it in our global operations for network operations and cybersecurity operations, critical.
Okay.
And excellent use case. Now, I would say decision-making.
Yes.
And, the execution of specific things based on that analytics are human-led roles. And I think that's where, over probably the next 12 or 18 months, we'll start to see the technology evolving more into autonomous flows, but it's not there yet in our experience. And so we're very cautious around, again, go slow to go fast, leverage it to drive the root cause analysis and the analytics, but make sure that you have your knowledgeable humans that are orchestrating, they're in the loop, they're driving the process and the flow. And so I think that is an area where, huge benefit, but you need to make sure that the role of the human is instrumental in that. Technical writing, we see our product owners using AI to build better use cases that they're handing off for user stories and so on into the development cycle. We see better consistency. We see the closed loop around development and our developers' life cycle from product planning, using data for analytics into the product planning cycle, and then prioritizing, writing those user stories, getting them into the backlog for the developers, more consistency, better quality, and then auto-generating the test cases at the end, giving your developers the ability to use code assist and things like that. So all of that's driving more productivity, better quality through the cycle. So there's many, many use cases across the board. I think what's important is that as you educate the business owners, you develop this concept of business champions or product owners in the business that can help drive. And I think once they understand the potential of the technology, they can help bring those use cases, because you'll never lose the need to have people that have domain expertise. That's critical. Context, domain expertise, the history, those pieces are critical to building your agentic flows. And so leveraging the business to help drive that. And the more business champions you have that are enabled on the technology, it gets back to what is your model? And,
Yes.
we talk a lot about the evolution of IT. And, sometimes we joke about shadow IT sitting all over the organization. In the AI context, it's important to build, and again, you have to build based on what your organization is capable of. But I believe firmly in building a hub and spoke model where you have a center of excellence that's driving the guardrails, the governance, the foundations, the tooling, and is giving you the art of the possible. And then where you have business groups that are more sophisticated, they can start to build out. Where you have groups that need help, you have teams that can help. But the face of IT is changing as well as you start to decentralize some of the development of agentic technology.
If I were to stretch a metaphor, I'd almost say you're developing an AI fabric or an agentic AI fabric with that decentralization, to stretch the data fabric metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it also brings us back to what you were saying at the very beginning about simplicity and keeping your eye focused on the goal, because the more you can do that, the more you're deploying the business knowledge to solve has this innate understanding of what the technology involves. And again, you're not taking the technology and searching based on that. You're asking business leaders to apply their creativity to say, okay, this is what I do today. How could I do it tomorrow?
Absolutely. And deliver outcomes, right? Never lose focus on the business outcomes, and get the business leaders to prioritize the outcomes that are going to be the most impactful to their organization.
So you set the framework and then you almost let it build in a grassroots kind of way, in fact.
It's true. Finding the champions is so critical. And so some of the early wins with agentic AI may not be the highest value to the business, but you can't lose sight of the focus on getting those champions that can continue to help build momentum across the organization.
Right.
And so for us, like I said, it was super strategic to work with HR to enable them, to get them building some of their own flows.
With their broad reach.
Absolutely.
Before we came into the studio, we were just talking about root cause analysis. And I just wanted to pick up on that for 1 second, because I was wondering what the role of agents is, or LLMs, but AI in general, in root cause analysis. Does it replace the diagnostician? Does it replace the person who is asking questions, or does that person have to still be there breaking it down themselves to do good root cause analysis? It's
a great concept to dive into, because it really helps articulate the value of the human, I think. In basic troubleshooting, the human in the loop is guiding where the questions are being asked and how the data is being presented. And if you think about that in the AI world, using the right prompts, having the right input to get AI to go look for things, critical. And so I think of it in the context of that assistant. If you think about it as an agentic assistant and, our NOC specialist or the troubleshooting lead, whatever their role is able to guide and pull the data without having to dig up the data themselves, right? Go analyze these logs and find me ABC. And then, they are driving that kind of tree of problem solving. Over time, some of that can move into AI and will naturally move into AI as you start to orchestrate flows. So initially, it might be search and summarize all these logs and look for ABC. The next time, you might have a flow that's going across multiple different log systems to look for different things. And you can build out that knowledge over time, but that human is going to be the one that's fine-tuning, that's building, that's delivering the value. And that's where that human in the loop is critical to driving the assistant and then maybe the orchestration of tasks and then maybe overseeing autonomous flows of tasks and ultimately then making the decision. But that is not going to be replaced. And when we talk about training models and, in an enterprise context, we talk a lot about fine-tuning models because the public models are trained with public data. But what's specific to the enterprise, kind of the keys to the castle, our secret sauce, what differentiates us, we don't want to put in the public domain. But we absolutely will fine-tune models over time and fine-tune our implementation with our internal data that is then able to help drive. And that's where those roles are so critical, having that subject matter expertise and domain expertise, the critical thinking, which AI is not good at doing today. Over time, we'll get better, yes, but it's not going to replace that role.
So we still absolutely need those problem-solving skills, those diagnostic skills, more than ever by the sounds of it.
More than ever, absolutely.
You were going in so many interesting places. You've already articulated, I'd say, a toolbox of concepts for executives and leaders. But before I let you go, I'd like to dig one layer deeper because we're at the foundations and prerequisites, right? For successful agentic AI transformation, and consider information and data management. In fact, OpenText's bread and butter. You're a global leader in information management. How necessary is strongly managed information in enabling good AI outcomes?
I think it's a basic foundation. I think, we talk a lot about good data, good business processes leads to good AI outcomes. I think managing and having your data available for AI is critical because AI can't run without data. It needs data. And so having confidence in the quality of your data, that it's governed, that it's well managed, that you have strategies for both your structured and unstructured data, and you can leverage that, gives you the confidence that the data that you're getting from AI is valuable, is relevant, is able to help you make business decisions and drive outcomes. So that investment in information management for organizations that have made it, it speeds up their journey. And it makes it definitely gives them more confidence in their AI journey. And those that need to clean up their data, they can still achieve some outcomes with AI, but the quality may not be at the same level.
Understood. You've seen a lot of organizations in M&A situations, as you mentioned, and so on. And so I imagine you've faced many fragmented legacy systems and fragmented data, which is effectively sort of a situation of technical debt. Do you have a preference or a view on how organizations can move from this fragmentation to a modern AI-ready data estate as quickly and seamlessly as possible?
I think the key is to start. And I think sometimes, in my role and CIOs that I talk to, you look at a landscape that might not be perfectly clean or that may have different legacy systems and so on, and it can be overwhelming. And definitely for our teams, when they look at, they don't know where to start. But the key is to start because trying to solve everything at once is the key to failing in a big project, right? Too much scope, not clarity, the big bang, exactly. We've all been part of those programs where the scope is daunting. But I think that if you focus on a piece and what you're going to solve, a problem, a piece of data, what you want to do with that data, how you want to drive an outcome, you can slowly clean it up. and you can slowly build a transformation. And so, it would be disingenuous of me to say, build an all singing, all dancing data lake and then apply AI, because that would take organizations 5 years
to do.
And then they would get to AI and the technology would have moved on. And so I think it's got to be very tailored and focused around what is the area, what is the state of the data, what can you do, what can't you do with it, and then how are you going to? Yeah, absolutely. I think the pragmatic approach always wins the day, and it's back to the theme of simplicity. Keep it simple. Solve a simple problem and then incrementally solve more problems.
Meet the world as it is, not the way we'd like it to be.
Absolutely.
Interesting. As we close, I'd like to just come back to your role, right, as CIO, CDO, etc. And I was speaking to one CIO who was really highlighting the fact that he's much more a change agent in the world of AI than he ever thought he would be in his role of CIO. How do you see AI transforming the role of the CIO, your role in what you do in an organization?
I think it's radically transforming the role, because I think that it's, the collaboration and partnership across the business is critical. And I love the analogy you just used of a change agent. I think, one of my closest partners is our CHRO, which 5 years ago never would have been the case. But I think that, working together, understanding the transformational impact on the organization of technology is critical. And I think that, being that strong partner to the business to bring the technology solutions that are going to enable revenue growth or transformation or whatever it needs to be is key. And so I think I see my role as being the technology partner of our business leaders. I am not driving a technology-specific agenda for technology's sake, and I'm really there to enable the business outcomes. And so I think that level of business savviness and being able to understand the role of the business and how they're working and spend time with their teams and understand deeply requires a CIO to get a much broader perspective of the organization and how it runs. Understanding how each department is working, the intricacies, the overlaps between teams. It's less about just running a team of software development professionals, and it's more about understanding how the organization works and then how you're going to serve as an enabler too. So it's a different role than when I started in technology many years ago, but it's a more fulfilling role because you can always link to the business outcomes you're driving.
Right.
And I would say my team would tell you today that they know exactly what impact they're having on our business. And when I started in my career, I could tell you a lot of acronyms. I probably couldn't tell you how that was impacting the business.
Fascinating. So a multidisciplinary business leader, much more than technologists by the sound of it.
Absolutely.
Shannon, you've given us many nuggets, as I mentioned. Let me just put you on the spot for one last question before we run out of time and close. If there's one misconception about AI that you wish executives understood better or that could clear up for them, what would it be?
I think it would be that you don't have to run fast to drive outcomes for your business. And I think that there's a race to AI that, is being asked in boardrooms around the country. How fast are you going? Are you going fast enough? Are you delivering outcomes fast enough? And it's not a race. And knowing your business, being able to be focused on what outcomes you're trying to drive and not playing into that race to fail, frankly, is going to deliver better outcomes. And so I would rather be asked about the foundations that I have in place, the governance, the enablement across the organization, the readiness, the maturity of my model and my organization to adopt AI, than how fast I'm going. And I think that's the key. Speed is not always the winner.
What an invocation to work smarter, not harder. Shannon, we're out of time, so as we come to a close, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me today and for sharing your experience in leading large-scale transformations like the ones at the agentic AI frontier. And to our audience today, thank you so much for being with us. If you found this discussion compelling, please consider liking and subscribing. So long for now, and see you next time on the Adastra Podcast.